Hi, I'm Patricia, and this is Investigating Vegan Life with Patricia Kathleen. This series features interviews and conversations I conduct with experts from food and fashion to tech and agriculture, from medicine and science to health and humanitarian arenas. Our inquiry is an effort to examine the variety of industries and lifestyle tenets in the world of vegan life. To that end, we will cover topics that have revealed themselves as common and integral when exploring veganism. The dialogue captured here is part of our ongoing effort to host transparent and honest rhetoric for those of you who, like myself, find great value in hearing the expertise and opinions of individuals who have dedicated their work and lives to their ideals. You can find information about myself and my podcast at patriciakathleen.com. Welcome to Investigating Vegan Life. Now let's start the conversation. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. I am your host, Patricia, and today I'm excited to be sitting down with Jane Buscemi. Jane is a certified plant-based nutritionist and founder of Vegan Under Control. You can find out more on her website, www.veganandundercontrol.com. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. I'm excited to kind of climb through everything that you've done. You've got a really unique and personal narrative and history with the vegan world in general. For everyone listening who might be new to our podcast, I will first read a bio on Jane before I pepper her with questions. But prior to that, a quick roadmap for the line of inquiry. We'll first ask Jane to kind of unpack her personal story with vegan life and vegan cooking, and as that ties into all of her work endeavors. And then we'll ask her to define some terms before we unpack her website, the Vegan and Under Control, all the services and information she offers there. And then we'll look at actually unpacking the website. We'll look at the recipes, some of the services that Jane has there, and everything else. And then we'll get into some rapid fire questions just about the industry in general. Those of you who follow this podcast have written in, and we always like to honor that with including some of your lines of inquiry with every guest that we have. So, as promised, a quick bio on Jane before I start peppering her with questions. Jane obtained a certificate in plant-based nutrition through the Center for Nutrition Studies. With over 100 healthy recipes in her kitchen portfolio, she's cooked and shared many culinary creations with family and friends. Even non-vegans became fans of these tasty dishes. Best of all, she has been able to demonstrate how anyone can manage the preparation and cooking of these dishes within their own schedule. Now she's passionate about helping others take off weight and demonstrating the health benefits of plant-based lifestyle. Healthy eating can be delicious, satisfying, and help her clients and audience lose those excess pounds. So, Jane, I truncated your personal bio incredibly because I was hoping that you could start us off today by explaining and further elaborating about your vegan journey, which I know from your website and researching your information started in early adolescence. Can you share that story with us?
Sure. As a teenager, I wanted to, I knew firsthand about animal slaughter and I wanted to get away from eating meat. And I told my parents I would like to stop eating meat and they said, you can't because you will die. And they weren't lying. They just honestly believed that. And I learned that I could and I tried and I became a vegetarian. And then later on, I became a vegan. The path to vegan was about it was about maturing and health levels being not as good as they could be, and it was about learning about factory farming and and then the environment. And my convictions just led me to become a vegan. And after that, I I got more and more into health as time went on, took the nutrition class. Um, I am plant-based whole food, which means that I use primarily whole foods in my cooking. I don't use any oil. And I am low fat. And I am low fat because not that nutrition thinks that's exactly where to be nowadays, but I am low fat because fat per calorie has twice the amount of calories as carbohydrates, and protein and that way I can eat more. I'm not a portion control person. I love food. I love to eat. I'm a foodie. I like to explore recipes. That's how I create them.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I want to be mindful of health.
Yeah. And I think I've spoken, well, the majority of people I've had on this particular podcast are not portion control fans, if you will.
Right.
A lot of people who practice veganism, it may be a byproduct of not needing to, unless you're more of a junk food vegan, as the term goes. But it does seem to be a common thread amongst this industry that you've kind of sussed out, which is people, they want to really engage with their food in abundance, in color,
Yes.
amount, and things of that nature. And you've kind of dropped us into a really great area now, to defining terms. And I think this is really important to do, with all vegans amongst each other, because it's important to know what we're all talking about when we use the words vegan, plant-based. You also mentioned whole foods, which I would love for you to kind of define for everyone listening as what these terms mean to you. So when you speak about vegan and plant-based, what do those terms mean to each other and on their own?
Okay. Vegan is a general term that people like to reserve for I am in it for animal rights and animal advocacy, as and I will eat anything as long as it does not come from an animal in any way, shape, or form. Um, and plant-based means that it's health geared, that you're not only a vegan, but you are also concerned about health. And so generally when people say plant-based, that's what they mean, at least in this country. I think it's used a little bit differently abroad.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you define whole foods? I think that's one for a lot of people who are not kind of up to current terminology.
Right.
Everything can be seen as a whole food. How do you personally define it?
When something is highly refined, when it's processed, um, it basically does things like turn to sugar right away in our body. When food is whole, it has fiber. And fiber is very important because fiber helps to satiate us. It makes us satisfied with our food, which is what you want to be if you don't want to overeat. And it helps regulate blood sugar and does a lot of good things. So generally, whole foods is food that contains fiber. And so it might be whole wheat as opposed to white flour, whole grain as opposed to processed grains, um, and goes on from there.
So, the way you're describing it, is it kind of as close to its natural form as one can get? Because
It is as close to its natural form. But make no mistake, I'm cooking. So cooking is, in a way, a process itself. Um, and so is putting stuff in the blender, which sometimes is not a good idea nutritionally, and sometimes it is a good idea. But yes, so it is close to the natural thing, but I'm not going outside picking something and just eating that way. I am
right.
more or less doing something with it. Yeah,
Yeah, and then you get into the raw conversation and things like that. I think it is a
you
good
do,
mention that cooking in itself is a process, and you're processing the food with that.
right?
It's good.
I'd argue that raw also can be a process because if you marinate something for a long time, you're also changing the chemistry. But okay,
Yeah, yeah, and citric. I mean, if you can cook things without any heat, right? You
yeah.
cook them with citric acid and things like that. I love getting into the minutia. It's so fun. I'm wondering, before we start unpacking your site, you have this overarching emphasis that started out as it was kind of narrated by your personal story, where it was an analysis of fat. And as you mentioned before, looking at the calories in fat. And you
Right.
plug and cultivate and curate your recipes through this. It's you very much so, up front with all of your recipes are calories from fat. And I'm
Yeah.
hoping you can first start off by explaining to us, if you differentiate between different fats, which ones are good for you, under your umbrella, which ones are bad. Do you have any of those lists, and how do they make sense to you?
Um, so the fats I use are not really added fats. They're the natural fats in the food. So um, I don't use any oils, whether they're unsaturated, monosaturated, polysaturated, or saturated. But certain foods that are very good for you, like avocados, have a little bit of saturated fat. So it will, it some comes into there. Um, and my concept is that if people want, they really only have to look at that fat number to get an indication of how much one can eat of it, to get an indication of quantity. Um, because if you are a tall male, you can eat a heck of a lot. If you're a small female like me, you cannot eat a heck of a lot. And even though I don't do portion control, there are better choices and worse choices. So the lower the fat, usually the better it is for weight loss. But having said that, going forward, I've discovered that there are these personal nutrition apps that some people like to use. So I'm going to be putting up on my website over the next couple of weeks some additional numbers so that if people want to use those personal apps to track their calories or nutritional values, they will be able to. So it won't be the only number in the future, but it is the main number that I go by.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into it now. Let's unpack vegan and undercontrol.com. First of all, the name. Where did the name come from? I love it. Vegan and under control.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
The name came from the fact that I have a very talented niece in advertising who was brainstorming with me and worked out what would be the best thing to use. And that's how it came about.
It's great. I love plays on common perception. And I think one of the most common perceptions that, anyone who's been vegan and had the pleasure of running into people who aren't and maybe not as read in as what the vegan environment is that it's a hyper militant, out of control philosophy. And the people involved in it are terrifyingly.
No, and I think it is the opposite. It's very much in control. But some people say to me, well, whose control do you want me to be under? And the answer is your own. So,
Your bodies.
your bodies. Yes, you want to control your own destiny and your own fate in your own body.
Absolutely. So if you enter the site, the landing page, you're immediately kind of confronted with, a lot of your core tenets in this great visual display. One of the things that you have is you've got these recipes, and I first want to climb through that before we get into the classes that you offer. And I'm always curious when someone is, a chef and cooking vegan foods and developing vegan recipes and sharing them. My first question is, what is your curation process? Like, how do you decide what goes up and what doesn't make it onto the site to share with your audience?
Um, I just went through and I tried to avoid recipes that would need a lot of other recipes to work on. Um, but I basically just picked a few of my favorite, a few of the things that I think that people would look at and say, wait, how could that be dietetic? That sounds really good. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to say to people that it isn't dietetic in the old-fashioned sense of the word. It is something delicious that you eat because you want to respect your body.
Yeah, I like it because I think that what you just said is really true. I was looking on in the Hearts of Palm Caprese that was just on very close to the top, and I hadn't really. It's a return to a lot of classics that just kind of
Yes.
or I think regardless of how long you've been vegan or not vegan, you can kind of lose inspiration or sight and start cooking the same things over and over again, particularly if you're satisfying more palates than just a couple in the house, like myself. And
Right.
reintroducing ideas of, a caprese or a Brussels sprouts, or you had one on grilled zucchini that inspired me when I was researching you to up and grill some zucchini on the barbecue, of course. Those are beautiful things, and so I think that it's not just the simplicity of the recipes, which I love, not only for re-inspiration for vegans, but also this, mild conversion, which you speak to on your site, where people who are not vegan can kind of say, that's enjoyable. That's really nice. I'd like to, endeavor in that. So I'm a big fan of small processes, and like you said, recipes that don't require other recipes,
Right.
particularly when trying to reach the masses, and things of that nature. Um, do you have audience write in? Do you take suggestions from pupils that you have in your classes or other people about recipes they'd like to be seen as veganized, switched from non-vegan to a vegan format?
I sometimes have, and I kind of welcome ideas because it's fun to pick things that people want and like. So I encourage people to give me feedback, and I've designed a few recipes for a few different people and a few different events, and it's been kind of fun. I have this tofu Benedict thing that I did once for as a brunch request, and it's one of my favorites. It works out well.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful. I'll have to take a look at it. I want to turn now to your cooking classes. This is something that may have changed with latter day events of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, I'm curious to see if you've pivoted or so the cooking classes, did they take place in person or online? You have two cooking demonstrations.
No, I've never done any online. I've been a little bit camera shy, I confess, but I'm getting there. I've made one video which is not up any place at this point in time. Um, so everything that I've done is in person. And you're right, I cannot at this in this climate, I have no way of doing that type of thing.
Yeah.
So what I pivoted to is enriching myself by taking more nutrition. So that's what I'm doing.
Fantastic. That sounds wonderful. I think that cooking classes could very, seamlessly be transitioned to online and then just service as a package. It can also help with people's schedules. In the
Right.
future, there's an accommodation that happens, I suppose. And I know that you lose some of the interpersonal when it's not live, but sometimes
Yeah.
it's like those. I want to look at your past cooking classes because I have questions regarding this, and we had a lot of people write in. So this will be mixed in with our audience members that wanted me to ask vegan chefs that gave instruction and things of that nature. What are some of the top misperceptions that a lot of people who were coming to your classes had in regards to vegan cooking that you kind of saw be unfolded?
Well, I think that I've had a lot of non-vegans being introduced to my food. Um, so I think that they kind of um, didn't really, you know what it would take to cook or what it would take to make something taste good. And I like to think that they were surprised that it comes together so well. I mean, it is not the same as a carnivorous type of diet it's in terms of preparation, but that things can be managed, particularly, with things like putting something into an electric pressure cooker and being able to turn it on whenever you want to turn it on and making the meal happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of tools like that that I think that bring about this organic moment. It turns people away from the pantries and cans and things like that, and really makes, for me, my Instapot, this pressurized pot cooker, opened up the entire world of. I haven't bought a can of beans or dried peas or legumes or things of that nature
Absolutely.
5 years
And
because of experiencing that.
it tastes better that way too, doesn't it? Particularly chickpeas. So, yeah,
Just had some last night, and it's so the process. I've taught my 11-year-old, how to do it. It's so simple. The amount of chopping up an onion and quickly sautéing it and throwing in some spices, and then the water and the beans and letting it go. It's surreal how quickly it can become a stew or just beans. Or it would never occur to me to go back to cans because it's faster than actually going out and purchasing the cans. And you're right, the taste with the lack of sodium. We had a lot of people write in asking about cooking oillessly, and I haven't been able to ask a lot of guests about that because I haven't had a lot of vegan guests that have gotten into this oil-free cooking. And I love the idea of it. I have to say, I was new to the concept as of last year. It didn't even occur to me that you could saute an onion in a little bit of water. And why couldn't you? This idea that you
Yeah.
have olive oil was silly if you think about it, but we have to like kind of get down to questioning all basics. Do you have oil substitutes, or how are you sauteing things? When people naturally think of oil, they're thinking of that you need the vehicle of the fat or something like that. What do you substitute with?
Um, well, food will taste totally dead if it has no fat, but there are natural fats in many foods. So most of my recipes contain some items that have higher fat than other items do, and taken all together, they just work. Sauteing itself, you can do broth or you can do water, and that works out very well. I think the areas that I tend to add a substitute for oil is for a recipe like a salad dressing. So last night I made a salad dressing, and instead of oil, I formulated using some water and some ground chia seeds. And depending on the recipe, I might use something like flax, which is even, a higher pack type of thing, but sometimes you'll taste it. You use different type of seeds or whatever, and that pretty much makes a moist type of product.
Absolutely. And you're right. I hadn't thought about beans and things of that. I was the person putting in, for no apparent reason, like 4 tablespoons of olive oil when I was doing my pressurized cook of dried beans, and
Right.
the second I removed it, there was no missing it except for the
Yeah.
400 calories that it lacked.
Yes.
That's it's a lesson in kind of subtracting. We frequently, even I think as vegans, have these extra added ingredients that it's like, do you need all of that? Like, like let's look
Right.
subtracting it and kind of honing into the classical French flavoring, where it's like, these singular pillars that you want to taste. Salad dressing is a good one because it's one that kind of boggles my mind as well. So you mentioning this chia seed and water moment, and as well as the broth. I think broth is another thing that I always I create batches of it when I cook in my pressure pot, the electric
Nice.
pot. And so, you cook this vegetable stew, but then you extract all of this wonderful broth that you can saute with and perhaps make a salad dressing, as you're mentioning. I hadn't even brainstormed that. So then I'm learning something new. I'm wondering, is it difficult to show people how, when you're doing your cooking classes, is it difficult to kind of instill the idea of no animal products, or does the switch happen quite quickly for them when they're non-vegans? Do they kind of think, oh yeah, there's a whole world out there that can substitute in?
I think that I have a load of people that are still flexitarians,
Mm.
and that's okay. I want them. I want them to get used to it as much as possible because that's a transition point. I think everybody transitions in their own way, and there's no telling other people. Um, so I think they get used to how to cook vegan in this way.
Yeah. When you started your focus on looking at calories coming for fat, and this kind of being a lens that you looked at most recipes that you're doing through, was it through a personal desire? Was it about weight loss? Was it about heart health? What was the motivation for that?
I had I had heard it. I had seen the work of Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. Campbell, and they are of the no oil school, and I had seen it work for people. Um, and I knew it was healthier. And I had tried it and I had lost some weight, but I didn't want to embrace it because I was used to my oil.
Yeah.
So I went back to my oil and the weight crept back on. And I said, wow, this really does work. This one difference is so huge in whether or not I gain weight or not. And so I just said, okay, I'm going to formulate it that way. And then I found that you could go overboard with nuts. And cashew nuts are a basis for a lot of different sauces and my mayonnaise
Yeah.
and all different types of things. And so, I didn't particularly like that. But then when I learned how to balance it all and use a nutrition program, everything fell into place as far as making any recipe work.
Nice.
So I basically create them on a nutrition program.
And that's the key. I think a lot of your recipes, tricky. I would think perhaps easy and seamless for you now, but doing that dance between simplicity of ingredients, being very, very cognizant of fat content from calorie content from fat, all of the things that you're paying attention to, and keeping the ingredient list very concise and things like that from the recipes on your site that I've seen. It's a beautiful dance, and really keeping that algorithm in
Thank you.
place. Absolutely. I'm wondering, you've got resources on your site, and one of them is about blood tests and interpreting them. Have you
Yeah.
created that yourself? And can you talk a little bit about how you've looked at blood tests to incorporate your diet?
No, I didn't create that myself. That refers to Dr. Clapper's work.
Right.
And so I felt a need at one point in time to understand blood tests. And I said, what a great consumer vehicle. For me, this is all about consumerism. So I want to present to people things that make a difference and that teach people how to empower themselves with taking care of their health. And so I came across that video and a presentation by him. Actually saw it in person at first and decided it was worth putting on there.
Absolutely. It seems like another attachment that you have is the brain and ideas of Alzheimer's with the Alzheimer's Solution book. And I'm wondering if you, like myself, there's an incredible connection between heart disease and dementia and Alzheimer's causing things. And these are paid attention to by people like Dr. Joel Kahn, who is, he's I think one of the flags
Right.
in the nation of, of vegans that are very much so considering fat and the vegan diet as part of these massive contributors to heart disease. But what's interesting for me is there's always a marriage between heart disease and then Alzheimer's, later early onset dementia, things like that. Have you yourself done studies towards that? Was that part of your inclination of reaching away from oils, or was it mainly the physical basis?
It was mainly the physical basis for me, but I have to add to that is that I have family members who have been so afflicted. Um, and I can tell you that I had no influence on changing anybody else's diet in that respect. And that the fact that diet and keeping one's vascular system intact can help that type of thing is an amazing gift. And I wish that more people knew about that and were inclined to do it.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I'm wondering, do you have any thoughts that you can share with us today regarding the COVID-19 pandemic and your endeavors to have this vegan diet and kind of share your information on the vegan cooking realm? Do you have a conversation that you've had with yourself about the COVID-19 pandemic and the intersection between that and veganism, or not so much?
I I have read other people's work which have said that our immune system is strengthened through our diets, and I am happy to hear that. Um, what is particularly alarming to me is that this whole thing may very well have been caused by a wet market and animal treatment, and that if people didn't eat the way that they did, maybe this virus would not have happened in the first place. And if if there is humanity, there's how we care for our fellow creatures, and it would be a lot better of a world if we all were vegan, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, a very interesting thought. I was ruminating with a guest not too long ago who was talking to me, and he said, listen, it's my firm belief that in a decade or two, our grandchildren are going to look at us and say, did you really like continue eating animals? Like, did you continue living in this cave person like manner in 2020? And even after the pandemic, even after it threatened to wipe out civilization and cause a whole new, like, all of these warning signs. He said, I feel like I can already hear the narrative coming through, and my just being like, I don't know why we kept doing it. If there's anything else, food is such an attachment. If there's anything that proves the emotional attachment to the cultural of food, it's things like this. Because if it were hairspray, that would be off the market in a hot second.
Right.
Every
Right.
dog would say, we're not using that kind anymore. It's done. We don't need
Yeah.
that much. We will switch formats. But digging your heels in, and even if the wet market, I don't believe it's been definitively proven. I personally believe it probably had something to do with it and things of that nature. I stay away from conspiracy, but I know that everything has an origin. And for that purpose, I simply want to learn of the origin to help prevent things like that from happening again. And if there's a play that, the consumption of animals is dealing with future pandemics, the idea that we would not entertain switching when we have such
Right.
amazing universes of alternative foods and Beyond Burger, and for those hardcore cattle raising people that just need that meat flavor, I think we've nailed it. I think we have it. There's meat alternatives that taste so much like meat. I don't prefer them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Think that we have these ideas, and I agree with you. And to that end, I wanted to ask you, because you've been so candid, where for you do you see the future of vegan eating going? Do you have an idea? Do you suspect, given what's happening, where people are headed with it? Do you see an opening, a continuing opening? What do you see happening there?
I see the vegan world as being a large world with different groups of people doing different things. I think you're gonna have your people who are junk food vegans. You're gonna have your health-minded people, and you're gonna have your super health-minded people. I mean, you have a lot more restaurants that are opening up with different type of things, and I love it. Vegan Mexican is one of my favorite, um, and I see a whole lot of differences in the vegan world as far as how we cook, but I think there's a place for what I do, and there's a place for the way other people might like to eat too.
Absolutely. I agree. Well, Jane, we are all out of time today, but I wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us. I know that this is not, your favorite format, being on video, and you took the time to do everything. I really do appreciate you unpacking all of the work that you do on your website and all of the information that you have.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this interview, and I appreciate all the work you put into it and getting to know who I was and the questions that you asked. It's been magnificent. Thank you very much.
It was our pleasure. It's my pleasure. And for all of you listening, we've been speaking with Jane Buscemi. She's a certified plant-based nutritionist and founder of Vegan Under Control. You can find out more on www.veganandundercontrol.com. Thank you for giving us your time today. And until we speak again next time, remember to stay safe, eat clean and responsibly, and always bet on yourself. Slancha.